Hey everybody, welcome on into ClayShare. I'm Jessica Putnam-Phillips, and tonight we have a fun live tutorial. So I've been working on some things in the studio, and one of my friends and fellow ClayShare members and an awesome person all around, Debbie Dela Cruz, sent me a little care package last week, and in it was a bunch of very cute things. But one of those things was her new cutters for making these kiln stilts. And I already have some kiln stilts, but I thought it'd be really neat to make your own, and sometimes it can be hard to find kiln stilts, so we'll talk a bit about that. She also sent me some really cute stamps. So if you haven't checked out De La Design Gifts yet, do that, because her things are ridiculously cute. She's got bunnies and flowers, and then I have a class on making flower frogs, and I teach you how to do it, but she also sells a little flower frog cutter. So she's got a couple different sizes of those. And then something we're going to be doing later, we're going to make these, well, it's actually right here, this daffodil candle holder, this guy right here. But I already have a class on making a candle holder, but it's not a daffodil. So I'm going to show you how to do a daffodil version, and we're going to use Debbie's cutters in prime time for the daffodil, but I have everything already on ClayShare. If you can't get these, don't want to get them, I mean, I think they're worth getting. But and then what else? Oh yeah, and Debbie is going to be joining us in June as the sponsor for ClayShare. So we're going to have a lot more coming from Debbie, but I couldn't help myself. You know, it's the week before, 3 days before Easter. So I thought we'd do some fun stuff, make some kiln stilts, talk about using kiln stilts, why they're really important, or maybe not, to your ceramic practice, and some other things. Now, I hope everybody's doing well. Hi. I debated on taking this week off because holidays coming up. No, I don't mean Easter. I mean my birthday. It is a holiday here at ClayShare. But no, we're not going to take it off. We're going to be here with you all, and we're going to make some kiln stilts. So what are kiln stilts? Well, they're in the big group of kiln furniture, and kiln furniture is all the things we put inside our kiln. So that's our kiln shelves, that's our kiln posts, that's our kiln stilts. There are bead trees if we use those, whether you make one yourself, and I have a class on that, or you purchase a bead tree. There are also any kind of structure that can go in the kiln to help aid in firing. So that's kiln furniture. So the kiln stilts themselves are usually made of a ceramic material, ideally one that fires hotter than you're going to fire to. So that's really important. Keep in mind, and we'll get back to that in a minute. And it has these nichrome wires that have been embedded in it, and those also fire hotter than the temperature you're going to. Again, really important. And what they do is they hold your piece up off the shelf that's glazed, so your glaze doesn't touch the shelf. Now the glaze will stick to the little points here, but you'll pop it off and sand it down, so it's fine. But it doesn't always work, and I started my ceramic career not using kiln stilts because I began making pottery firing to cone 10 in gas and wood-fired kilns. And in gas kilns and wood-fired kilns, we do not use kiln stilts at all. We use things called clay wads when we're firing wood-fire kilns, and they work in a similar manner to kiln stilts, but a little different. So I hadn't used kiln stilts until I started firing lower when I was teaching courses, because we did low fire clay. And those of you who fire low fire clay are pretty familiar with kiln stilts, because low fire clay doesn't vitrify. Terracotta, anything firing to 04, 05, it remains porous in the glaze firing. And so what you do to make that food safe is you have to glaze the interior and the exterior of low fire pieces. Well, when you glaze the bottom of something, you cannot sit it on your kiln shelf unless you're trying to make some really cool sculpture and fuse everything to the shelf, which you can do, but it's kind of hard to drink out of a mug when it's stuck to a kiln shelf. So you glaze the bottom, you sit it on a kiln stilt, you fire it thusly, and pop it off when it's done, sand down the little points, and it's good to go. And it makes your low fire pieces food safe, so you can use them for food. Now when we fire to cone 5 and cone 6, or cone 9, 10, 12, and those upper temperatures, the clays we're using are made to vitrify, which means they seal themselves up. So you do not have to glaze the bottoms because the clay is sealed. You don't have to worry about any moisture leaking or weeping out of that. So it's good to go. So you don't really need to use kiln stilts. So for me, maybe the first 10 years of my pottery career, I didn't use stilts at all because it wasn't necessary. But when I started doing low fire pieces, it became a necessary thing. And then I was doing some mid-range, some cone 5 things. And the thing about mid-range clay is it's exactly like high fire. You know, you don't put glaze on the bottom because it seals up, but sometimes you might want glaze on the bottom because you don't like the look of an unglazed bottom. And when that comes into play is, say, something like a sculptural piece, like these little pumpkins that I make. So I was making these and I wasn't glazing the bottoms and I was sitting them on the kiln shelves. And I guess we'll go over to camera 2 so everybody can see. But, you know, I had this bare spot on the bottom of my clay. It wasn't attractive. I didn't like it. And I don't have any pumpkins to show you, but I do have another spherical sculpture that I made. And you can see the way I fired this here is there's no glaze. I wiped away the glaze. So I have this bare spot. And I just didn't like the look of that on the bottom of my pumpkins. So to fix it, I would glaze the bottom, like this piece here, fire it on a kiln stilt, like this, so it just sits in your kiln, like that. And then when it comes out, yeah, the kiln stilt stuck to the bottom. It'll be like this. You will pop it right off, and then you can use a little sanding pad, get it wet, and just sand down those points. The 3 points where the kiln stilt touches your glaze, it's going to leave a little pinprick, and it can be a little sharp. So you want to sand those down. I usually use a 120 grit, right here, diamond core tools. You get it wet, you just sand those 3 little points down. You can go with finer grit, you can go with a 240 if you want to make sure it doesn't disturb too much of the glaze in the surrounding area from where that pinpoint area is. And you just sand it down, and now it's as smooth as it can be. See, I can rub it all day long and it's not going to cut me, and it's not sharp. But look how nice this looks. It's finished all the way around. So for a sculptural piece, that's kind of what I wanted. And you might decide you want that for your mugs too, and you don't want an unglazed bottom. Now, I don't mind the bottoms being unglazed. I like them that way because that's how I learned, and it's kind of what I was first introduced to. So for me, this is just part of making pottery. I don't glaze the bottom. But this is a cone 5 clay fired to cone 5. So we didn't need to glaze the bottom. All I do is I still get the sanding pad wet, and I still sand the bottom because I want it to be very smooth and not scratch anything that it's sitting on. So, you know, it's an aesthetic thing, right? But what happens when we're firing low fire clay? So we're going to be talking about different clays a little bit. I'm going to be skipping around, so just follow me, right? When we fire low fire clays and they don't vitrify, they don't really slump on us much. They don't sag. We don't have to worry about them deforming as much as a cone 5-6 clay or a cone 9-10 clay. So when we fire something that's big and flat, like a plate, or say a test tile, if you want to fire that on kiln stilts, and it's a cone 5-6 piece, what sometimes happens is when we have kiln stilts under it, you're going to get sagging because the clay is getting to its top temperature, it's vitrifying, and it's starting to melt. It's almost to the end of what it can hold up to for temperature-wise. And when you fire it with kiln stilts, something like this, even if you use a couple of them, like 2 or 3 to hold it up, you might get sagging in the middle. So this is why oftentimes with big plates and things that we're firing to cone 5, cone 6, we don't use kiln stilts. So they don't work all the time for higher temperature clay, but for smaller pieces, they can. So I would say small trinket dish size, pendants, jewelry size, smaller sculptural pieces, they'll work. Even if we make big kiln stilts, we still have a lot of area that's not supported, and that's where we run into these sagging issues. So keep that in mind if you're going to work with mid-range clay and you want to glaze the back. Now, in my little herb steak, garden steak class that we have, the way I make these is I make them so that they fire completely flat. So you do not have to use kiln stilts. Because we have this long expanse here, this long run of clay, if we put a kiln stilt under, well, this won't work, even if it fits, because we're going to get sagging here and sagging here. So it's going to sag and slump down. And you know, just imagine if this was wet clay and you tried to put it on here and it flops. That's exactly what's going to happen in the kiln firing, is this is going to get too hot and it's going to flop. So with the higher temperature clays, that's an issue. But if you were going to use low fire clay, you could absolutely fire them like this on the stilt. Actually, I wouldn't use one stilt. I would put a stilt at the foot and a stilt kind of near the top. And low fire clay, I would glaze the back and fire them if you wanted a glazed back. It's up to you. You know, these are all personal preferences. And something like this piece here, I did not glaze the back, but I could have. This is a cone 5 clay, and because it's going to hang on the wall, no one's ever going to see the back. So I didn't worry about glazing the back, but honestly, I think as a presentation, this would have been a better piece. And if I had glazed the back and then fired it on a little kiln stilt like this. And there's no real worry about something like this slumping. It's small, it's compact, it doesn't have a large area sticking out that's unsupported. So something like this, I wouldn't be worried about having a slump issue where I would with a platter or a plate. So I just wanted to discuss that before we get into actually making the kiln stilts, because a lot of people will post pictures of things they've made, big platters. You know, even something this size right here, it's not even a huge, huge piece, but something like this, if I tried firing it with kiln stilts, I'm probably going to get sagging where it's not supported. So your only way around that would be to support every bit of it with the kiln stilts and have a bunch on there, and I just think that's asking way too much. I think that would be just more work than you really want. Besides, the color of the clay works so nicely with this. It's not that big of a deal. So let's see if we got any questions so far so I can keep up with everybody. So you've cut yourself many times on kiln stilt spots. Yes, so on the bottom here, if you don't sand it down well enough, you will get cut, because glaze is liquid glass, and when we have it interrupted by something like a kiln stilt, it becomes a really rough, sharp spot, just like broken glass, and you rub across it and you can get cut. So please sand them down, especially if you're making work to sell, because you don't want anybody ever buying your pieces and then they grab a hold of it and get cut, right? That would be a very, very bad thing. So here's another one I did, this little baby pumpkin with no texture, and I think it shows what the kiln stilts do a little better. You can actually see where, you see that little spot, that white spot? So that's where the kiln stilt was on this particular piece. And you cannot see anything like that on the textured one. It really hides any area that might have had the kiln stilt. Do you see that little white bump down there? See how close I can get? I think you guys can see it though. There it is. That's from the kiln stilt. Now that's just one little spot on the bottom. It's smooth because I sanded it down, and it looks pretty good. I mean, so your choices are this, and maybe you get a little spot, or this with no glaze at all. I personally will take the tiny spot for a sculptural piece, right? Just a tiny little spot. So you glaze flat ornaments on both sides, then fire them on stilts, like the glazed look on both sides. Right, and ornaments are small enough, same thing with pendants, that we don't have that huge area that we have to worry about having a big slump issue. This candle holder, this little guy here, this could be on a kiln stilt. This is not too much of an area. These little, I call them shooters, little shot glasses, but they're just great little mini juice cups. This, if I wanted to glaze the bottom, this I could fire on a kiln stilt. It would be fine, because this surface area isn't that big. So you just got to find, yeah, that one would work right here. So, you know, you just find one that will work. Mugs also, but you have to watch out when we're firing mugs and they get hot. If it has any slumping at all, what can tend to happen is it can slump into a piece next to it. So you could potentially lose the piece that you're glazing and the piece next to it. So keep that in mind when you're working with kiln stilts. All right, do I have anything else to share over here with kiln stilts? I'm looking. I don't think I do. I think I got it. So use a wet Kemper stone to sand down the points. Whatever you have, yes. So what do we got? So if you have a mid-fire clay and you glaze fire at cone 5, can you then put low fire glaze on the bottom and refire at cone 06? You can. But what can happen is when you refire some of these cone 5, 6 glazes, the glaze themselves can change. The surface quality can change. So if it was a gloss glaze, it could then shift and it could become a matte or satin glaze. The color could completely burn out. Did I save I fired a pie plate again at cone 05 that I had fired to cone 5, and the color shifted majorly and it crazed. So some glazes do not like to be fired again at low fire temperatures. So keep that in mind and make sure you do tests, because you won't know what's going to happen until you do it. So I fired that pie plate, and I think I've shared it in our Prime group and with our premium members. And it was a bit disappointing because Jeff from GR Pottery Forms made the pie plate and gave it to me to glaze. We did a collab. I glazed it, Glaze fired perfectly, went ahead and put a decal on it, decal firing. The glazes I used, which were Amico glazes, did not like being refired. So now I have a piece that I don't know if I can save. So do test, and try not to test on precious pieces because you don't know what the result's going to be. That's why we make things like this, a test tile, right? Or, you know, this is a good sized one here. You can make these little guys too, which gives you a really good idea and a lot of information on how a glaze is going to react if you fire it again. So you glaze it, you fire it to cone 5, 6, if that's what the glaze is for it. And then you put it back in the kiln, you do another glaze firing at a lower temperature, and you see what changes, if the surface quality of the glaze changes. So this is one of my celadons. This is Tiger Lily, and here it is. This one was actually dipped, and I fired this again at cone 05. It's fine. It doesn't change at all. It's the exact same as it was fired to cone 5. So no problems there, but some glazes don't like being refired. So how do I usually bisque fire a spoon rest or a garlic grater, flat or on the edge with silica underneath? So I usually fire them, bisque fire. I don't use any supports like under small things. The only time I will put alumina hydrate or silica sand or dry kiln wash under a piece is when it's a large platter or a large sculpture that has a lot of a surface area that's going to be resting on that kiln shelf. But for something like a spoon rest, a bisque fire is not going to cause any problems. Bisque, it will not warp or slump in the bisque. It's the glaze firing that you have to worry about because the temperatures are getting hotter. That clay is getting closer to what it can handle for its top temp before it starts breaking down. So that's the thing about vitrification. Vitrification is the point where clay gets to its top temperature, the clay seals itself up, but if it goes hotter, it starts to break down. It means that everything in it starts to melt. It can't hold its shape anymore, and so it does what we call slumping. And that's where it just kind of, it just loses it. And you have to find that point between when the clay is vitrified and when the clay slumps. And manufacturers give us guidelines, like Laguna says their B-Mix 5 fires to cone 5. So we know, fire it to cone 5. Can you take it to cone 6? Yes. Although sometimes if you go to cone 6, you could get bloating and you might get some slumping. So you got to watch out for those things. Can you fire it cooler than cone 5, like a cone 4? You can. It won't be as vitrified, so it might weep a bit. So just keep that in mind if you're not going to take it to its top temperature. So yeah, Joanna's asking about my new glazes. My new glazes can be fired again without any shift in surface quality or color. So no issues. I can show you right here. This is my Buttercup, my yellow, and we'll go over here to camera 2. This was fired to cone 5, Buttercup, Clayscapes cream on top. So that's what we have going on this little picture. And then I put a decal of a bee that I drew, and I printed it out and applied it. We did this in a few weeks ago in a tutorial. We did this together. And then I fired it again to cone 5. And you can see the glaze, we've got no shift in color. We've got no change in surface quality. It's just as glossy and shiny as it was when it came out of the glaze first time. So my celadons, there's not any issues, but not all glazes. And all glazes do that. And I don't want to call out, I hate saying what ones have failed because they're not a bad glaze. It's a good glaze. It's just, it doesn't like to be fired again. So for the Amico ones. Yeah. All right. So if you made a stilt for a mug, you could make a circle the same size as your mug base and put the wire in different places, so no slumping. Yes, you can put a lot of wire in there, But what tends to happen is you have higher spots, lower spots. You could get a little rocking, and then it could slump, and then when you take it out, it could rock on the table. So it's doable completely. Just test it out and see, right? You can totally test and see. So mostly when we buy kiln stilts, you can definitely find them for low fire, no problem. But finding higher fire kiln stilts can be difficult, mostly because the market hasn't been there. The market really looks at low fire studios and what they need for kiln stilts, because that is something that's used a lot, and it's not used so much in the cone 5-6 or cone 9-10 at all. Actually, I don't know anybody firing the 9-10 that uses these unless they're doing smaller sculptural pieces. But when we do big pieces and you fire that hot, you're really risking a lot of slumping issues. I'm not saying it can't be done, it's just not common. So to find these right here, and here's some that I got, and they're made by a company I believe called Star, and they have been a little tricky to get. Now my clay supplier carries them, so I can buy them easily, but not everybody can get them. And so this is why it's great that Debbie came out with these cutters, because you can make your own. So if you're firing your pieces to 5-6, ideally you're going to use a clay that goes hotter, like a cone 9-10 clay, ideally. But do you really want to go out and buy a bag or a box of 9-10 clay just to make a few kiln stilts? You probably don't. So you can use clay that fires at least as hot as you're firing. So if I'm going to be firing B-mix, I need to at least use B-mix clay, right? Just keep in mind that they won't last as long as they would if you used a higher temperature clay. But you know what? You can make them again. You've got the stuff if you get, you know, and you can make these sculpturally without the cutters. Absolutely. You can completely make them. So you need some clay and you need some high temperature wire. And this is nichrome wire. That's nickel chromium wire. That's what we use. This one here that I have is made by Kemper, and I believe it's a 17 gauge. Yep. So this is my Kemper high temp wire. 17 gauge. I got 10 feet of it here, which is plenty for this. I use this for sculptural pieces if I'm going to add some nichrome wire. Sometimes big jewelry pieces I will use this, but this is a little on the heavier side. And I also have another spool that's a 16 gauge, and it's even thicker. So this is a really heavy duty one, but I use this one on my homemade bead tree. So that's what I use this for, because it's really stiff and it's really big. Now, nichrome wire itself has a life, and it only lasts so long before it starts to flake apart a lot, and then you might have to make new kiln stilts. How many times can you fire stilts? I've been firing these for about 12 years, and I'm still going. So, and these are cone 6 clay, these ones here. So I got no problems with them. They're actually holding up really well. What has happened is over the years, can you see the glaze? That's little bits of glaze over the years has fallen off my pieces, you see, or just transferred. See how there's a shine to it? It's just transferred to the stilt, and it's given it a little gloss, a little sheen to it, and that's what they're for. Right? That's what they're for. So they're going to last you a long time. You might make a batch of these and you won't make them again maybe in your lifetime unless you break them. Or you just find you need a lot of them. I make these small pendants. Here's one. We'll come over here. So these right here, this is from Bead Week, not 2022, it was 2021. I believe we did this pendant in Bead Week 2021. And you can watch that class and make one of these. I teach you how to make the stamp that we put in here, and we make the pendant with it. But this right here, I glaze both sides, and then I'll fire it on this kiln stilt, just like this. Because I really like that smooth glazed surface when you're wearing something, I'll come down here, around your neck, so that you have, it's just a nicer, I don't know, I think clay that's just bare feels like sand dollars, so it has a really nice feeling like that, but I also like the feel of glazed clay. So I won't say I don't like bare clay, because I do, but I also like the feel of glazed clay. I mean, I make pots. I like the feel of all pots. What can I say? I never met a pot I didn't like. That's a t-shirt, right? So how do you know when your stilts have lived their lifespan? Well, they'll break on you. So that's how you know. They'll start to fall apart, like crumble, or the little nichrome wire will start to flake. And I've had what happens, now here's one I made earlier. What happens is then one of the little stilt posts, little stilt wires, has just like broken off. And that's it, it's done. So it expired that way. But I'll tell you, when I buy these, they're like 60 cents. I think this one was 60 cents. They're not expensive, but when you need 20 of them, it can add up. So making your own, the baby ones are the ones I use the most, because when I do little things, I will have like shelves and shelves of these tiny little guys. So heard people say they use old kiln elements to make stilts. So you can use old kiln elements if you want to save them when you switch them out. Usually they are curly, so you'll want to straighten them out, which you can do. But what happens is over time, those elements, the nichrome wire that they're made out of, because they're made out of the same thing, it's going to flake and flake and flake, and it will get brittle. With every firing, they get more brittle, and they will eventually break. So they already have a bunch of wear from being in the kiln, and then obviously they got replaced. So can you use them? Absolutely. And if you are wanting to recycle every little thing in your studio, you can. Oh, this is a good one to show. We'll come back over here. So actually, this one's getting close. So when they start out, they are vertical. And as they slump over time, do you see how that slumped slightly backwards? This will keep going until it eventually just flops over. And then that's the end of it, if it doesn't break off. So you got to watch it. Can we pull it back and straighten it? Well, remember, this is very brittle. If we pull this back, we probably will just pop it. There it goes. Probably just pop it off. That's it, it broke. No, I'm kidding. I didn't break it. But it wouldn't be surprising if I did. So I won't try to straighten this. I'll keep using it. But eventually, what can happen in a fail, if it's catastrophic, is we have a piece on it. And you fire that piece, and then that piece slumps over onto another piece. And then you just lost a couple pieces. So maybe I shouldn't put this one back in the kiln, right? You don't like bare clay on your chest either, right? Yeah, so even in my aromatherapy pendant class, the way we make those aromatherapy pendants, we glaze the back side, we leave the front side porous with low fire clay. We do put underglaze, which seals color in, but it doesn't seal the clay, so that we can drop our essential oils on it, but the back's glazed. Because and also with aromatherapy, this is a really good thing if you haven't done the aromatherapy pendants and you decide to go do them. You want to glaze the back, because if anybody has sensitive skin, and even if it's not sensitive skin, some essential oils are really harsh on people's skin, and that will protect their skin from the potential of any of those essential oils soaking in and causing any problems. So in the class, we do that. All right, let's make some of these. Let's make these. All right, so Debbie has made it super easy. Now you can roll out a coil and you flatten it, and you can roll it out into like a little tripod shape, little three-legged shape if you want to. You can get these cutters from Debbie, which I think are just really great if you want to make your own. You can always buy the Kiln Stilts from your clay supplier if you only need a couple. But if you're going to make a lot of jewelry, or you're going to make a lot of pieces that are more sculptural and you want to glaze the backs, you might want to think about picking some of these up, because it's just really nice to have them. All right, so I've got some clay that I rolled out. This, I would say, let's measure it, but I think it's about 3/8 of an inch thick. Thanks for the, I have a little mic. My mic got against me and started making racket. I'm sorry. Live TV action. Sometimes your mic rubs against your clothes and makes crackly noises, and I'm sorry. Okay, so this right here is 1/8, 1/4, not quite 3/8 of an inch, almost 3/8 of an inch thick is this slab here. That's fine. I mean, you can use the scrap clay you've got in your studio. You know, you're making some pots, you got some excess clay, you can wedge it back up, roll it out quickly, and you can make some kiln stilts. They don't have to all be the same height, unless you're going to use multiples on one piece, and then you do want them the same height. But if you're making a bunch of them, you just pick out, just like with our kiln posts. You know, some of my kiln posts, even though they might all be 3-inch posts. If I line up all like 20 3-inch posts that I have down in the kiln area, some of those 3-inch posts are significantly taller than others. So what I do is I group them in threes. Like these 3 are about the same size. Although they're all 3-inch, they're not all the exact same height. That's just how they end up being. So you might have some that are a little thicker and some that are thinner. That's fine. That's absolutely fine. All right. So clay, you know what? This is my old habit from making. This is just like ingrained in me to go ahead and smooth it out and get rid of the texture. You don't have to. You don't have to because they're kiln stilts, but good habits die hard. And you don't really want to get rid of good habits. So I'm going to do it. So we're going to smooth this out. And what size shall we use? We're going to use this size. I like the smaller sizes. Now, when we get to these big giant size, we got to put, you're not just going to put 3 little bits of nichrome wire for your kiln stilt in here. You're going to have to do a few down the spine of this because this is going to be for bigger things. But just keep in mind, this area here in higher temperature pieces would potentially slump without support. So you've got to think about that. The center is supported, but is it enough? We'll do this one. All right, so Debbie has done a little presser in, I don't know if we did it in a class or I talked about it when I started using cookie cutters years ago. I made my own bisque pressers for the cookie cutters I use the most because when you're using little small cookie cutters and you press them into clay, when you go to press out the shape, if you use your finger, you can distort it. So a little thing like this on this makes it so much easier. So you can just pop it out. And that keeps it nice and flat so we don't get distortion. So we just made a little one there. And I have a slightly damp sponge that we're just going to smooth out. Let me grab, sorry everybody, I'm going to come over here and grab this for, there you guys go. There. So you smooth it out, right? And you can put your nichrome wire in. So what I do is I'll make a few. I always make more than one. Work in a series, right? I'm just going to pop it out. And we'll do a baby one. I love the babies. They're my favorites. All right, so you can keep going and keep making if you want. Yeah, I mean, when I make things like cone packs, I usually will make 20 or more. If I'm going to make a bunch of these, I would make quite a few because you think about it. Every one of these that you make, you might need to put a pendant on. How many pendants are you going to make? If you make 20 pendants, you need 20 kiln stilts, right? Do the kiln posts shrink? Yeah, they will shrink just like regular clay. Yes. Now, when you buy them pre-made like this, they do not shrink. These have already been fired to their top temperature. These are not going to shrink on you. They are what they are. These will shrink. So this means you cannot use them until after you've fired them to glaze temperature. So what you're going to want to do with them is you're going to make them. You're going to let them dry all the way. You're going to then bisque fire them the next time you do a bisque fire. And then you're going to put them in your glaze kiln the next time you do a glaze kiln. And they're good to go. So just like when we're making bisque molds, except we go one more step further. All right, so you just smooth out any edges that are uneven or sharp. They don't have to be perfect. These are kiln furniture. They're not fancy things. All right, but you can make them fancy if you wanna. I got that 17 gauge.
Now, could you single fire those right up to glaze temp?
Oh, you sure can. Just make sure they're bone dry, because if not, and it explodes, it's gonna not only send shards of clay, but little nichrome wires to stick onto your pieces that are in the kiln with you, with your little kiln stilt friends here. So yeah, you can single fire them. Just make sure they're bone dry, and you're gonna wanna not do a fast fire, because remember, even if they're bone dry and all the physical water has been dried out of it, clay has chemical water in it, and that only comes out in the firing. So you don't want to go too fast with things that are being single fired. All right, so I've got a pair of wire cutters here. Now you can use your jewelry cutters. You know, I've got some jewelry pliers and jewelry cutters. The heavier gauge wires, like the 17, 16 gauges and bigger, which is lower number, remember? So like a 15 or 14 gauge. These here are harder to cut. So your really nice jewelry cutters and jewelry pliers that are made for 22 gauge wire, you might end up putting little notches in them if you try to cut this heavy duty wire with it. So I'm going to cut, you know, we got to go in, but we want a little bit sticking up. So we're going to cut off, and I'll measure it for you all because I usually just eye it, but we're going to cut about 1/2 inch. It's going to be about a 1/2 inch piece off. You could go a little smaller. It depends how thick your clay is, but approximately 1/2 inch. And so you just clip. So we'll just clip. You need, for the little guys, there it goes, bye. Sometimes I'll do this into a little bag or a box because you see how these are flying all over the place? So here's our little bits. I don't know if you zoom in a bit or a lot. Zoom in a lot because it's really far.
They're too far to the bottom.
No, I can move things. I have the ability. Oh, look how close you are. Yay! All right, so once you get these done, once you cut them, so like for the baby one right here, there we go. Too close. You just stab them in, and the baby one, you are just going to do 3, right? And you're not going to be on the very edge. You're going to come back from the edge just a bit. I mean, you can put it where you want, but I come back just a little bit. And you want them, kind of want them straight up and down. If anything, lean them inward, not outward. But here we have, oh, you can see, look how close that is. Look at that. Isn't that amazing? So this one's leaning in a little bit. We'll upright it. And that's it. Just let it dry. Done. Okay, this one here. So let's do this one. Same thing. It's a little bigger. It's more on par with this because this is going to shrink, remember? Depending on what clay you're using, you still got shrinkage. That's still a thing. It doesn't go away just because we're making kiln furniture. Things are still going to shrink. So you're going to want to go ahead and account for that when you're making these. And you think they're really big, but in actuality, they're, well, they are 12% bigger right now than they'll be when they're finished. So for something like this one, we're just going to do, again, one there. And you could use, here, if you have a hard time grabbing these little guys, some people find using tweezers or another pair of pliers really helpful. And you can just hold them by that and just stick it in. All right, so there's a little bit bigger one, right? And then we've got, oh look, magic, I'll turn it. So we got this bigger one here. And although bigger ones that I have in my studio and that I own will just have 3, we could do some spikes down. And I'll do this one with a few so that you can see what it will look like if you want to do something like this giant one right here. Do they need to be leveled? No, I mean, you can level them if you want to. You just change the height, cut them. But if you look at kiln stilts from the factory, yeah, they're not really level. But again, you're making these, so you're in charge of what happens here. So if one part is too high, you can take it out and trim it down of the wire, right? So it's not anything you have to worry about because you have control over it. So you can make it, all right, so I'm going to make 6 of these. So there's 3 so far. One more. There. Okay. So I've got 6. They're about the same. I mean, you want them to be as close to the same height as possible, right? And ideally, you'll be doing this not on camera, talking to thousands of people live. So you'll be all good and you won't have a lot on your mind. So we'll just stab these in. So the first one I'm doing is at the end. But again, I'm in about 1/4 of an inch. And then we'll come in about halfway between there and the center. So right about here. So that's going to give you more support. And then when we do the larger one, it'll give you even more support. Think of it as like a runway, right? Kind of making a runway for kiln posts. Do you need one in the center? No, you don't want one in the center because what happens is that could potentially create a high spot and then it could rock. So we just do the edges. Could do one more on the inside here if you want to, but it's up to you. It's entirely up to you. So you use stilts called bed of nails, and you love to make some of those. I don't know bed of nails stilts. You use a lot of stilts when you fire because you make a lot of sculptural pieces. Yes. You put a wire pin in the center as well. So, I mean, you know what? You're making them, so you can put your pin wherever you want. That's the beauty of it. So here's one I made a little earlier, and I forgot to put the pins in before it dried. So now what is this? This is just a little clay wad. So we can make jewelry out of it. I mean, how much do you love pottery? Right? I mean, right here, and you put another nichrome wire. Oh, is this soft enough? Oh, you know how this goes, right, folks? I've got some nichrome wire use. Okay, so if you really love pottery, and you know a lot of potters, and we're all nerds at heart, which is a good thing, you could make yourself, but which way do we hang it? Do we hang it like this? Do we hang it like that? It's difficult to pick. And then you make jewelry, and it's kind of spiky, so you look very edgy, and people like, there we go, don't mess with you. All right. For the focus, there we go. All right, so I just made a pendant. This is a Kiln Stilt pendant. I might adjust it a little bit. There we go. All right, I'm going to fire this as a Kiln Stilt, and then I can wear it as a necklace. Right? Why shouldn't we wear Kiln Stilts as pendants? I don't know. I think we're onto something here, especially these little babies. Right? And if you wear this out, people are going to ask, what is that? Oh, it's a kiln stilt. What's a kiln stilt? Oh, I'm a potter. It's a thing we use when we put on the bottom of our glazed pieces to keep them from sticking to the kiln shelf. Wow, you make pottery? Yeah, I make pottery. So this is your introduction, right? And I just gave you a sales pitch introduction, folks. So if you're trying to sell your work and you want to create a conversation between you and a potential customer or student, now you have an introductory piece right there. You wear that pendant, and folks are going to want to know about it, and they're going to ask you questions. So now you're going to make yourself a pendant. National Art Craft sells stilt pins already cut, saves times for cutting. National Art Craft ceramic and pottery heat-tolerant stilt pins for making, kiln, firing supports. One package of 250 pieces. Michael, you are now my favorite person for sharing that, because I do not like cutting up tiny bits of wire. This is why I use the nichrome wire use, because my time is better served making the pots, not making the little hardware bits. So I am going to write down on the back of this paper, so I don't forget, National Art Craft ceramic, because I will forget before this evening's over, for the nichrome wire pins. Okay, all right. Almost brought the cutters at Clayshare Con. Yes, you need to know. So yeah, kind of dangerous, but not really. Not more dangerous than anybody wearing spiky collars or spiky bracelets, which that's very much part of people's jewelry wardrobe these days. So a kiln, the little kiln stilt necklace, you're edgy now. I think it's great. I'm actually going to make a couple of them. I wonder if my daughters would wear them. Probably not. They would not think it's cool. I think it's cool. So Amazon sells pre-cut wire as well. All right, so the one thing I want you to keep in mind when you're buying your wire, make sure you find the firing temperatures of your wire before you purchase it. If it doesn't fire as hot as you need it to, your wire could actually melt on you and slump, and then you could be running into trouble. So keep in mind when you're buying wire that if you're firing a 5/6 stilt, right, or piece of some sort, make sure the wire will go that high, ideally a little hotter. The Kemper is, I believe, the high temp wire Kemper makes a cone 9, I'm pretty sure. And I wonder if I can peel up the label and see, is there more information on here? But I'm pretty sure the Kemper, no, it's just a UPC. They fooled me. But they make definitely high temp wire. And nickel chromium nichrome wire is so much more readily available than it used to be because of the use of vape pens, because they use nichrome wire. So you can actually find it much easier than it used to be, which is kind of nice, I think. All right, any other questions out there for firing with stilts so that I can go over any questions at all? You caught me live and you were wondering how to make it. Uncle Buck, now you know, right? It's so fun to do it. Not a ring though, you'd be arrested. If you made a kiln stilt ring, yeah, because that really is aggressive, and I think that could be considered a weapon. I think making a little pendant necklace is kind of like fun, you know, because you might poke yourself with it, right? Or if you hug somebody close, you might poke them accidentally. But it would, you know, it's not like you're trying to actually hurt anybody, because there's no intent, no malicious intent at all for making kiln stilt pendants. No, it's all just fun. All right, so the big guy, like I showed with this one here, I would just make spikes down the spine. Just go down the spine with it, and it would be good. Which wire for ornaments? This right here for hanging ornaments. It's the nichrome wire U's because they look like they're in the shape of a U. And I get mine on Amazon. And I had a bunch of them in the ClayShare shop on Amazon, which is amazon.com/shop/ClayShare. And if you go in there and look somewhere in there, they were in there. They do sell out, and then I find another brand and I stick them in. But as long as you're going to 5/6, you're good. So $21.67. And now you can get them on Amazon. Exactly. So be careful hugging. Exactly. Hug, gentle hugs when we hug, so we don't impale anybody on our kiln stilt pendants. So can you make these with a circle or square shape? Why can't you? Absolutely. I don't see why you couldn't make them in any shape at all. Maybe a flower shape. So, you know, you don't need the whole solid shape though, so you could cut bits out, and you know, you can make kiln stilts in any shape you want. Oftentimes I think they were just made this way because they were mass produced. This was the mold they had, this was easy, and this is what you got, right? But as far as shapes, I don't think there's any rules. And if they are, you know, rules were meant to be broken, so you get to make them any way you want. So now I got to make some more because I went ahead and turned that into a pendant. How can I use it? I made it into the thing I need to use it for. I turned my tool into the pot. So kiln stilt earrings, right? You could do a bazillion different things with these. Just have some fun. Think outside the box and see what you come up with. So I guess what else do we have going on? Studio update. Just need to have the rest of the roofing done and the main door installed and the second floor rough flooring. What is it? Is it called rough flooring? What is the flooring called? That subfloor? Second floor subfloor finished. They're going to come back Tuesday and finish that, and then our electrician comes next week. Oh wait, what am I talking about? For those who might not know, we're building a new studio. And I'm working on a studio layout class that is going to be coming for my premium members soon. And it's going to be all about laying out your studio flow. And this is the thing. This is great if you're building a new studio, but you can take the space you're in and you're going to be able to apply what I teach you in this class to your existing space, and you might renovate it. So this is my 4th pottery studio that we're building now. My first pottery studio was our guest bathroom. Yep, that's right. I took over the guest bathroom, and we actually built in the carport downstairs, my kiln room and glaze room and everything. So it was a 2-part studio. And then my second studio was a 2-story barn, also here in Vermont, that we renovated. And we renovated it, and I set it up for my workflow. But after about 10 years of working in that space, we totally ripped everything out and redid that studio space because my workflow over the years had changed. And we redid that space. So I worked in that space for another almost 6 years. And then we came here, and we've been in this space, which we've been limited with what we can do in this space as far as workflow, but I have organized it to the best of my ability with what I have for space here, because it's significantly smaller than what I'm used to. And then the new studio was like, here's a blank canvas. What's your dream studio layout look like? And so that's what I got going on in the new studio that's being built. But what I'm going to talk to you about is workflow, how you work, where to put things, where to maybe move things to so you can work more efficiently and it can be better organized for you. So it's going to be really exciting and fun. So you're going to like them. All right, so you have the nichrome wire called beds of nails. You use them all the time and you love them. I'm going to have to look up what the beds of nails is because I don't know that. Cookie cutters in the flower shape for mug handles. You could use them for, oh, the little tiny one, absolutely. The little one that I use for my mug handles, that would make a great kiln stilt cutter. So if you're watching this, and you are somewhere where you can't get Debbie's or you just want to make them right now and you need something, I mean, I've got drawers full of small cutters. You could just use a small cutter and make a kiln stilt. Although I think this is so awesome. It's really awesome. All right. So anything else before we go? So National Art Craft Ceramic Pottery Heat Tolerant stilt pins are, what temp though, does it say? They got to be cone 10. They should be. How many square feet will the new studio be? So downstairs, it's a 34 by 42 downstairs space. That's inside. And there's a kiln room, which is a shed, which has a roof right now and one wall, but eventually that'll be closed in. So that I won't count today because it's not fair. So the upstairs is going to be 32 by 30 on the second floor. So the second floor, 1344 on the bottom. This top's like 960. So it's basically like 2100. And then with the kiln shed, it's going to be another like 700 when that gets added on. It's going to be 3,000 square feet when it's all said and done. It's a bit big, but that's all right. I've got a lot of stuff. People think it's huge. I can guarantee I will fill that space up in no time. So it's going to be very nice. You'll have to all come see me. Open Studio Weekend, Memorial Day. Come to Vermont. You can 3D print a mold for kiln stilts from flexible filament. Okay, Michael's, yes, and those of you who just took the 3D printer workshop, you guys could make your own kiln stilts, right? If you wanna, it'd be awesome. So, let's see, loop on pegboard hook, you would get a neat looking pegboard hook. So, I guess I'm not following. Oh, there's more. Kiln stilt necklace could be used on a pegboard. Oh, yes, on a pegboard extender. So you could hang it on that. And that way you could store them there. Very nice, right? Yes, so you made a pendant, but now you could hang these in your studio on pegboards. Brilliant idea, Diane. I love it. So what wire is this? This is nichrome wire. That's nickel chromium wire. That's the wire used in here. That's high temp wire that can fire in your kiln. Regular wire won't work. Hope I put in a bedroom when I do not want to walk back that couple hundred feet to my house. The commute is too far. There will be a love seat or small sofa upstairs in the second story, along with my espresso maker and my kettle for tea and a little mini fridge. So I potentially will live in the studio. No, I have to come home. My dogs are at home. I have to come home. I have to walk back. But if I start taking the dog to the studio, then that's the look out. I'm just, if Levi goes to the studio with me, Kevin's going to be like, yep, that's it. I won't see Jess for a few days. So the aircraft pins are $21.90. Perfect. That'll work for you. $21.90, exactly what you want. No worries. You're given a large box of kiln stilts. Is there a way to tell what temperature they are for? So you could look on them and see if there's any manufacturer's listings. Oftentimes there's not. So my best guess, if you're just given a box, they're low temperature, they're low fire temp. You could test them out. That's, you know, put one in and with a piece on it, small piece, flat, pendant, fire it to cone 6 and see what happens. That's the only way you can really know if there's no marks on there. Can any clay be used for stilts, or best to use groggy? You can use any clay you want, but remember, the clay has to at least go to the temperature you're firing to. So ideally, if it's a 5-6 clay you fire your pieces to and that you make your pieces out of, you want that to be the clay your kiln stilts are made out of. A little hotter would be better. If you get cone 10 clay, that would be best, but honestly, they just might not last as long, and that's fine. You just make another one. They're so easy to make. So why can't you find older videos here on YouTube? YouTube only has some of the live videos. All of the premium classes are on ClayShare. So YouTube has a limited selection of what's available. A lot of the older videos that were on YouTube, like my Periscope videos, we pulled those off because they were really old. And, you know, I redid many of those. So it's all good. Anything else before we go? And Kevin could take a nap out there in the studio too. He could if he gets like tired and needs a break because I'm such a terrible boss. All right, so we're going to take a little break. We'll be back at 1/4 for our premium members. We're going to be making this beautiful daffodil candle holder right here. And you can make it for big candles. You can make them for votives. But I'm going to show you how to make it using Debbie's cutters, but I have my shot glass and my other candle holder class that we use cookie cutters from. I'm going to give you all the info so you can make it either way. So we're going to do that, and we're going to chat about stuff coming up in ClayShare land and all kinds of fun stuff coming up next at 6:15. Everybody else, you can go to clayshare.com or download the ClayShare app to watch replays of any of our broadcasts. You can also check up on all of our past workshops. We just had one end this last week. We got another one coming for you soon with Annie Kreisberg. She'll be joining us in July for a 3-parter. It's a big one for my hand builders who love texture. You're going to love Annie's workshop. We'll be putting information up in the next couple weeks about that workshop, and I'll be letting y'all know when we get the new class on studio layout, and I have another full-length class that we're wrapping up right now as well for you guys. So stay tuned for everything. All right, y'all take care, be well, and I'll catch you next week. Bye, everybody.